Good morning, baseball fans, and welcome to another edition of Sports Talk with Rags here in Season 4, Episode 35. And today here we are honored here to have the head baseball coach at Cape Henry, Chris Dotolo, on. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Rags. Thanks for having me.
Sure, no problem. Appreciate your time. Let's start at the beginning. Growing up, did you play all sports or just focus on baseball, especially as you got into high school?
Yeah, no, I played all sports, man. I mean, I played. My mom wouldn't let me play tackle football until I think I was 11, but I played in the Norfolk City, football league for 3 or 4 years, and then moved on to school football and played basketball, organized basketball in the winter. Back then, we played, I think, with the YMCA until I started playing at school, and always baseball. I actually played a lot of lacrosse too. I went to Norfolk Academy for 12 years, and they literally stick a lacrosse stick in your hand in first grade.
Yeah.
So I was probably a better lacrosse player than a baseball player for, quite a bit of my life.
Well, and that's the funny thing about lacrosse. I mean, I went to a TCIS match, and it's right up there here with, rough football and very, very competitive.
It is. And, the thing was, I remember, now this is back in the 70s, right?
Right.
So I remember back, boy, I was probably getting ready to start 7th or 8th grade. This would have been like 1979 or something. And, lacrosse being in the same season, obviously, as baseball,
right.
All my buddies were playing lacrosse at Norfolk Academy. And I remember my dad said to me, he said, "Hey, you can play lacrosse if you want, but there's really no life after college lacrosse." And at the time, there was a handful of schools that even had college lacrosse.
Right.
And he said, if you play baseball, at least you got an opportunity to possibly do something after college in baseball. And then I made the decision. I stayed with baseball and, put the lacrosse stick down.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, being part of Norfolk Academy, just in the TCIS, one consistent thing over the year, it's always been very competitive at the baseball level.
Yeah, it has been. And, that was, back then, I think the TCIS, it's a little different now. And, I obviously coach in the TCIS with Cape Henry. And I think the schools, especially those Norfolk schools, right? Norfolk Collegiate, the old Norfolk Catholic, Norfolk Academy, they were very, very competitive especially in baseball throughout the city of Norfolk, not just with private schools, but, there were some really good baseball players. When I was growing up, Billy Swope had come out of Norfolk Catholic, and to this day, I think he might be the last Norfolk high school player who's been drafted out of high school. I unless somebody's, come along in the last few years, I don't think anybody's been drafted out of high school in the city of Norfolk since Billy Swope back in the late 70s.
Right. Yes. And, that's something a stat that Coach Guzzo, shared at a ODU baseball banquet when Billy was honored here with a Bud Matheny Award.
Yep. And, Coach Guzzo, he was the old coach at Norfolk Catholic, and then, went on to obviously coach in college, and I played for him at VCU, and he's a great baseball guy. But yeah, the TCIS baseball, back in the 70s and 80s, I think it was kind of at the forefront of baseball in this area.
Right. And then what was the opportunity here after high school, as you just mentioned, not only playing for Coach Guzzo there at VCU, but starting out, just up the road here with your collegiate career being part of VCU?
Yeah, coming out of high school, Rags, I loved football, right? And I was a quarterback in Norfolk Academy, and I really wanted to play college football. And I had some smaller Division III schools that were interested in me playing football. And then I kind of at the 11th hour decided, I just want to play baseball in college. So went to VCU, played there for a couple years with Coach Guzzo, and I was young. I probably was behind physically with some of my skills, and there were guys ahead of me. And so I made the decision to transfer to Virginia Wesleyan and played for Nick Booth there for a couple of years, and kind of hit my stride, I think, once I turned 20, and then got an opportunity to play in the Giants organization after that. And so I was in the Giants organization for 4 seasons. And when I finished playing with the Giants, I had a buddy of mine who was coaching up in the Cape Cod League.
Yeah.
And the summer after I had gotten released, he's like, "Hey, why don't you come up here and coach with me?" So I went up and I coached up with the Harwich Mariners up in the Cape Cod League. It was great. It was funny because I had just gotten out of pro ball. I thought everybody stunk in the league. I was like, these guys can't play. But it's there that I met the head coach from Dartmouth, Bob Whalen, and he had a position open as an assistant. And I met him at the end of that summer and ended up getting hired, and that started my coaching career, moving up to Hanover, New Hampshire in the fall of 1995, and then I coached all the way through 2009.
Yeah, and and then also with your coaching career, I mean, looking at your bio, I mean, definitely here after your playing days and networking, to find the right spot, but just your experience here with D3 and Division 1 with assistant coaching, and then leading to that head coaching job there at Hofstra for 7 years.
Yeah, so after Dartmouth, I ended up becoming the assistant at St. John's University. Yeah. Okay, in Jamaica, Queens, New York, in the Big East, right? And the head coach was Eddie Blankmeyer. And it's funny, the guy who had left has been the longtime assistant at UVA, Kevin McMullen. Okay. And so Mac was the assistant at UVA. I mean, he was the assistant at St. John's when I was at Dartmouth. He left to go to East Carolina to become Keith LeClaire's assistant. And then and I took his job at St. John's and was there for 3 years. And then the job at Hofstra opened up, and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna try and get this job." They were getting ready to enter the CAA. They had been in the America East forever. It would have been it's going to be their first year in the CAA, which is home to me, right? Growing up here in Virginia Beach.
Right.
So I got the job and, dove right in. So I led the Hofstra Pride into the CAA that first year in 2001. And, it was cool. I mean, Paul Keyes was the head coach at VCU, right. And Paul had been my assistant at VCU when I was there. And Coach Guzzo was the head coach at Old Dominion at the time. So those are two of my former coaches in the league. And it was really neat. And especially with Paul, I mean, Paul was kind of a mentor to me as a college coach, because I didn't know what I didn't know when I started as a head coach. I mean, it's a completely different world, than from being an assistant. Right. Everybody loved me I was the greatest assistant coach ever. Everybody loved me. As soon as I became a head coach, everybody hated me. Right. And so I used to lean on Paul a lot to just kind of get advice on things. And but yeah, that was pretty cool. So I brought Hofstra into the CAA and coached up there for 8 years, and it was pretty neat having a chance to come back down here and play. And and Jim Farr at the time was the head coach at William and Mary, and Coach Farr had been an assistant at ODU when I was in high school growing up. So there were 3 head coaches in that league who I had a pretty good personal relationship with before we even played a game against them.
Yeah, and the thing is at that time, the CAA was looking to grow into bigger TV markets and expand the conference. But my brother Mike Ragsdale, who played for Coach Farr there at William and Mary from 92 to 95, I mean, the CAA was definitely great baseball at the mid-major level.
I think just before the CAA expanded and brought in those 4 America East teams, right? So the 4 America East teams that came into the league that year were Northeastern out of Boston, University of Delaware, Hofstra, and Drexel. And Drexel ended up dropping baseball. Okay.
Right.
So that was left with three of the old America East teams. But just prior to that, when University of Richmond was still in the CAA, and I think East Carolina might have been in there at one point. Yeah, I think the RPI for the CAA a couple years before the expansion was like maybe number 2 or 3 in the country.
Right.
You know, I think it was like the SEC and then somebody else and then the CAA. I mean, so it was really, really good baseball. I mean, it's still really good baseball. But I think with the expansion of those Northeast teams, just kind of dropped the RPI a little bit and, you know, kind of gave it a lesser, you know, was viewed on a little bit of a lesser degree than prior to that expansion.
Now, when you were an assistant coach, I mean, would you continue to network there during the summer to coach in summer leagues?
You know, it's so hard to do that at that level, right? So I remember when I took the job at Dartmouth, I had agreed to become to be the head coach for the Harwich Mariners for the summer of 1996, right? And when I took the job at Dartmouth, you know, I told Coach Whalen, I'm like, hey man, I'm going to be coaching up in the Cape Cod League, you know, next summer. He's like, you can't. He goes, that if you want to do that, then this job's not going to happen. He says there's too much recruiting, and especially at a school like Dartmouth, right? They recruit nationally. I mean, they're everywhere because it's an Ivy League school.
Right.
You never know who's going to get into school. So he said, you know, I need you on the road, man. I can't have you up in Cape Cod, for 2.5 months. So that kind of ended my collegiate summer coaching. And I really got into recruiting, and I never knew how important the recruiting aspect, you know, was for college baseball. I mean, I thought it was, you know, hey man, I played professional baseball and I know how to field a ground ball and it's all X's and O's and nobody cares. It's all about who can you recruit, right? And I mean, obviously the game's completely different now with the portal. But yeah, it was all about recruiting. I mean, you know, where are you going to go? Who have you seen? How can you get that kid on your campus and so on and so forth? And that was the name of the game.
Yeah. And the thing is with you as a player, you as a college coach, I mean, we're showing our age, but you know, you had to get in the car and go and watch. I mean, you still have to watch the kids play today, but with social media and video highlights and everything, you know, just the recruiting aspect these days is just a total 180 here with technology.
It's insane. You know, Rag, so when I first started doing it, there were no cell phones. Right. So I remember hopping in the Dartmouth recruiting car, and I had, so it was coincidentally the head coach at University of Richmond, Mick Aoki. Yeah. Mick and I are good buddies. I was in his wedding. Mick and I were assistants at Dartmouth together for almost 3 years. So when I took the job, I was the second assistant. Mick was the recruiting coordinator, top assistant for Coach Whalen, and so we had different territories. Okay, so. I had Pennsylvania, I had the Mid-Atlantic states, Mick kind of did the Midwest and California. And I remember hopping in the car and just going, and we had a whole schedule. We'd be gone for 3 weeks and we had a whole schedule set up, and then we'd come back in the office for 2 or 3 days and then we'd head out again for 2 more weeks. And it was a matter of seeing as many kids as possible in a short amount of time. And I literally had a map, or I went to AAA and got the triptych. Remember the old triptychs? Okay, it was a triptych, and it was go get them. Okay, and it was taking a lot of notes, and the videos that we would get in the office were the old VHS tapes.
Right.
And we had stacks of VHS tapes. And I was at Dartmouth. I was responsible for the VHS tapes, right? And so I'd sit there in the middle of the night watching all these VHS tapes to figure out, if it was a kid who we wanted to follow up on. But technology has completely changed. And it's just I think it's great for the kid, for the player, because it gives him access to a lot more schools than, he probably would have had, when I started out back in the late 90s.
Well, and so, after Hofstra, I mean, what was up for you next when you resigned at Hofstra?
I was kind of in a phase where I had always wanted to get back into professional baseball. Okay. I had I really had one opportunity when I took the job at St. John's.
Yeah.
Prior to that, Dayton Moore, who was used to be the GM for Kansas City, and now I think he's an advisor with Texas.
A former guest of Sports Talk with Ryan.
Dayton's great, and Dayton's a former assistant at George Mason University. And so when I started out coaching, Dayton was the assistant scouting director for Atlanta. Okay. Right. And I had expressed a lot of interest in Dayton about being a scout, right. And they actually offered me a job. I had been at St. John's for about a week. Okay, moved my family from New Hampshire to Long Island, right. And I get a call from Dayton one day, and he's like, "Hey man, we got a job for you." And I'm like, "Oh, timing's awful, but tell me about it." He said the territory is Minnesota to Kansas. I was like, dude, I can't. I just moved my family to Long Island. I can't move them to Kansas. Okay. So I passed on that. And then, fast forward several years, right towards the end of my time at Hofstra, I think this probably would have been 2006. Coach Guzzo, when he left ODU, was a scout for the Red Sox. For a year, maybe two. Right. And when he left that position, I said, that's a job I want. Okay. So I got on the horn and got my Red Sox contacts up in the Northeast. Right. I ended up interviewing for that position. They flew me up to Fenway. I met with everybody. It was a grueling interview. And I was up there for like 6 hours interviewing, and I really thought I was going to get the job. And that was going to be an opportunity for me to, not only move back down here to Virginia Beach, but to also get back into professional baseball. I ended up not getting the job. So I stayed at Hofstra for a couple more years. And then I said, I was kind of disillusioned with college baseball. It wasn't, I wanted to do something else. So I came back and actually got a job working at Norfolk Academy, where I went to school. Right. And I worked in the development office for, a handful of years, raising money for the school. And then they sucked me into coaching the baseball team, which was great. I did that for 3 years. So that was kind of my initial transition out of college baseball, but I had wanted to get back into professional baseball. That's what I really wanted to do. And it just didn't work out.
Well, with coming back here, growing up here, playing, then when playing college baseball at Virginia Wesleyan, so here with being back home and and you're back coaching here at TCIS, and I see that the 2 years at Cape Henry, I mean they're TCIS just in the conference, you're battling for a state championship with who you have to compete with to win the TCIS regular season and tournament.
Yeah, the TCIS. I mean, there's a few really strong teams in the TCIS. I think probably our bigger competition on the state level is the schools in Richmond. Right. Benedictine, St. Christopher's, Richmond Collegiate. Now you've got the Miller School from Albemarle, and their coach is Billy Wagner. Right. Okay, who he should be in the Hall of Fame. Right. So, and he's got some good baseball players up there. And, it's funny. So we play we play the Miller School. So he's got Coach O'Connor's son from UVA is on his team, and he's got Coach Sheff's son from Virginia Tech on his team. So he's got the two head coaches from the two big schools in the state of Virginia are both on his team. I think it's kind of funny.
Right.
Coach O'Connor's kid's a pitcher. He's going to be good. Coach Sheff's kid's a position player. He's going to be good. They got a good team. So that's, then you go up to Northern Virginia, you got Paul VI, then you've got some of those other schools. And so that's probably our bigger competition. But yeah, I've been the head coach at Cape Henry for 2 years. But prior to that, I was Tim Hummel's assistant for 4 years. So I've been part of the program now for 6 years. And it's funny how the baseball world, right? It just kind of, it's one big circle. I tell people this story all the time. I mean, Tim's the best. Okay. I thought I had like a pretty big baseball brain, and I thought the people I've been around have, learned from Tim has the biggest baseball brain that I've ever met. I mean, he sees things on the field, and it's just amazing. And I remember one summer when I was on the road recruiting, when I was with Dartmouth, I was up in upstate New York, up in Buffalo. Yeah. And they had the state of New York has a thing called the Empire State Games. Okay. Similar to what Virginia does with the Commonwealth Games. But the Empire State Games are a really big deal. And I'm up there in Buffalo at the AAA Stadium, and I'm watching this team. And at the time, Coach Guzzo at Old Dominion had this assistant. I can't remember his name. He was new. And so I'm watching things going on. And there's this infielder from one of the teams that I'm watching pregame, and I'm like, God, this guy's really good. He was like 6'3". I'm like, holy mackerel. Well, it was Tim Hummel. Okay, just finished his junior year of high school, and I remember I got a call from Coach Guzzo about 3 weeks later. He's like, "Hey, Dotes," he's like, "I know you were up at the Empire State Games. We're getting ready to have a kid come visit us on campus who was there. His name's Tim Hummel. Did you see him?" I said, "Guz, he's the best high school baseball player I've ever seen." Right. And then here we are, fast forward 20 years later, Tim and I are really good friends, you know? And I worked for him I was his assistant for 4 years. I mean, he just called me as we're on this. I mean, Tim and I talk daily, and I just think it's funny how small the baseball world is, Yeah.
I mean, it's something here with, I've lived in the Norfolk area since '87, and with working at the shipyard and, just stayed in the area, over those years. And I was starting to umpire about 8 or 9 years ago. And this one kid that was catching, he had his last name on the back, and it's not like Smith or Jones, but I was like, "Hey, is your dad Tim?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's the first base coach." And I was like, "Boy, I remember seeing your dad play as a Monarch and, playing professionally." And yeah, with my brother, I mean, let's bring up Nugget on how we even connected. I mean, here's a guy that played against my brother here in high school, and here, fast forward to now, and definitely here in the Tidewater area, the baseball world is a small world.
It is. And so Nugget, we're talking about Ryan Morris, right? Right. Ryan's a former assistant at Old Dominion under, I think it was maybe Guz and Jerry Myers, and he was a former assistant at VCU. And so I first met Nugget when he was a freshman at Virginia Wesleyan. I was, back from pro ball for, maybe my first or second year. And I needed someone to hit me ground balls, right? So he was my guy. And I'd be like, "Hey man, let's go take some ground balls." Well, selfishly, I never hit him the ground balls. He always hit them to me, but we became very good friends, and he's one of my best friends today. And he actually got me into the job that I have now with Edward Jones as a financial advisor, because he'd been doing that for a couple of years while I was still at Norfolk Academy. I do have a great Nugget story though. When he was at Old Dominion, they came up to play us up at Hofstra, and we had won the Friday game. They had won the Saturday game, and the Sunday game was back and forth, right? So this was back before the mandated coaches had to wear helmets in the batter's box. That wasn't a thing. Okay. Well, I figure I'm going to get a rally started. So I go grab one of our catcher's skull caps and I put it on. And you got to remember, at the time, it was kind of funny, right? Because nobody
Right.
was doing it.
Right.
So I go coach third base, and they're guys, the ODU guys in the third base dugout are laughing at me, and I'm like, it's a rally helmet, it's a rally helmet. So we end up, taking the lead. So Nugget thinks, well, if it's good for Dotes, it's good for me. So he puts on one of the catcher's helmets, a rally helmet. There's a play at the plate, bang bang play. Nugget runs down to argue the call from the coaching box. Forgets he has a helmet on.
Right.
Takes it off and thinks he has his hat on to go slam it into the dirt. Well, it's a helmet. It comes off the plate. It catches the umpire right in the chin. The umpire's like, "You are out of here." It was hysterical. So he blames me for getting thrown out of that game because I'm, with the rally helmet. But
Right.
it was pretty funny. It was pretty
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. And then with you talk about the state level, I mean, what private school does there at Shepherd Stadium? I mean, I know that it's not that far for the Richmond teams, but just the atmosphere that the semifinals and the finals there for Shepherd Stadium, it's a great experience for all the kids. I mean, because there's not all the kids that are playing high school baseball are gonna go on and play, next level or maybe even professionally. So the atmosphere that goes on those 2-3 days there at Shepherd Stadium for the Final Four,
It's
great atmosphere.
It's really great. And, I got Chad Byler from Norfolk Academy, who's the athletic director. He is the state representative for baseball for the private schools. So, he organizes that. He's very, invested in making sure that that goes well. He does a fabulous job. And yeah, you're right, Rags. I mean, those 3 days up at Shepherd Stadium. I mean, it's kind of like the College World Series for the high school. I mean, you roll in and it's, there's a game going on before you, and then they get the field right, and then the next game. I mean, it's really, really cool. And you get to see some teams that you otherwise wouldn't have even had a chance to lay eyes on. This area has been fortunate. I mean, Greenbrier Christian won the state tournament for the Division II this year. They had a great team. Walsingham, who's a TCIS team from out in Williamsburg, won the Division III title this year. So there's, Nansemond Suffolk was in the semifinals. So there was really good representation from schools in the area. But yeah, it's a great atmosphere for the kids. It's a great experience for the kids, and that's the goal each year, is to make it to Shepherd Stadium and see what happens.
Right. And hey, what about I saw this on social media the other day, but later on today, being part of the coach and staff, not only in the state baseball all-star game, but how about going back to the Diamond, not only affiliated with VCU, but now here, for the last 10 years, I think Richmond's been affiliated there with Giants minor leagues.
Yeah, and so they are. It's a double A for the Giants. When I was playing for San Francisco, our team was we were in Shreveport, Louisiana. So it would have been a little bit nicer for, the family and friends to be able to drive up to Richmond to see me play when I was in double A rather than come down to Shreveport. But yeah, so today is it's the senior all-star game for the state of Virginia. Yeah. So I'm going to be hopping in the car here, an hour or so after we get done with this and head up there. And I think it's a great thing that they do. So it's the Virginia Baseball Coaches Association that was started a few years ago, and there's some people on that staff that do a great job. Tim Mary and Sean Ryan from Benedictine, and Tony Simondera from St. Chris. I mean, they're all very instrumental in the Virginia Baseball Coaches Association. They've got a convention every year in January. I spoke at the convention last year. So this is a great opportunity for the best seniors in the state to get together, for a day of baseball at the Diamond. I'm looking forward to going up there. I'm coaching on one of the teams. It should be pretty cool.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then also I think the next convention here is not too far there, National Harbor. there come this coming January.
Yeah, yeah. So, those things are always great. I mean, all those conventions that I've been to in the past, there's always seems to be one thing that I pick up, right? Just when you think you know it all in baseball, there's always something that you learn from somebody at one of those things. So those things are great for, even for coaches like us.
Right. Yeah. Well, Chris, I know with getting ready to head up on 64 West, I know it's during the middle of the week, but with school being out, anytime you have to compete with the HRBT or any part of 64 West, earlier the better. So I
The
know you.
earlier the better. That's right.
Right. Well, thanks for your time here to sharing your story and any final tidbits here about baseball here in our area as it's kind of wrapped up here for the 24 season, and then everybody get back at it come this fall and preparing for the 25 season.
Yeah, no, it's, I'm also involved with youth baseball with the Virginia Blasters. I coach a 13U team, and it's just, this area is baseball crazy. It's good to see. I love it. I wish there was this type of organization and enthusiasm when I was coming along. These kids don't realize how lucky they have it. But yeah, thanks for having me on, man. This was awesome.
Sure, no problem. Yes, yeah, it's definitely. I mean, actually, you brought up with growing up at Norfolk Academy and lacrosse and seeing how that sport here at the high school level for probably the last 10 years, how that's grown.
Yeah, I mean, the public schools all have lacrosse now.
That's right.
And I think personally, I think it's hurting the private schools a little bit because now kids who would go to Cape Henry or Norfolk Academy to play, because they were interested in lacrosse, now they just go to Coxer FC.
Right.
And yeah, but look, it's great. I mean, one of my sisters lives in Naperville, Illinois. Her son's a lacrosse nut. I mean, she travels all over the country. He's like 13.
Wow.
So it's not just this area. I mean, lacrosse has really exploded nationally. Which is, it's good to see. I mean, I think the more opportunities you have for boys and girls to play sports at a high level, I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, hey, Chris, thanks again. And thanks again to Ryan for connecting us, and have a great summer, and see you at the ball field.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
All right.
Good job.
All right. Appreciate it.
All right, man. See you.